On. Great, we're recording. Thank you so much for everyone being here. My name is Brian Brogan. I'm the Director of Family Business at St. Joe's University, and we have a great presentation on how to start a podcast with Russ Haworth. And I'm going to share my screen so that we can get right into it. James just texted me to make sure you can see everything okay, and we'll go from there. All right. Russ is with the Family Business Partnership, and we're happy to have him today with the IFBE. Okay. All right. Looks good. All right. So today's presenter, coming from the UK, over the pond, if you will, is Russ Haworth ACFBA. He's the founder and the president of the Family Business Partnership. He's also a family business consultant with over 15 years of experience working with families. Traditionally, he came from a financial planning background and has received advanced certificates in family business advising, I believe from the FFI, which is a very strong designation. Also, he has basically been a pioneer in developing and kind of laying the groundwork for podcasting and being a host for family business issues. And that's where he's going to share his expertise today around how to use the podcast to increase communication. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when communication breaks down, and more importantly, how we can use Russ's advice as to how to use podcasts to increase communication within the family unit. Again, my name is Brian Brogan. I'm the Director of Family Business at St. Joe's, going close on to my 4th year. I'm also an adjunct professor in both management, psychology, and finance. It's just that I have a lot of interest. And there is an overlapping theme in all of them, actually, whether it's behavioral finance, the markets, sports psychology, industrial organizational psychology, or management, entrepreneurship, and family business. There's a lot of overlap in leadership and buy-in and groupthink, which I find fascinating. So just to give you an idea, Russ and myself working with family businesses, I have an addictions background in psychology. And so one of the areas that we played in was really red light families. And, this was a challenge for me in my beginning of my career, working with systems that were addicted or had an addicted person in the family. And so there was a lot of, I guess, reward in working with red light families. The issue is when you're doing family consulting with family businesses, these families, if you identify them correctly and early enough, you need to almost stay away or bring in a family therapist to work with those families. A lot of times, new family consultants will get in over their head, if you will, and try to address issues that really they don't have the skill set to do so. That's one of the things we do here at St. Joe's, is kind of train advisors how to assess that in an appropriate fashion. Yellow light families are great. Most of the families are yellow and or green. Our goal is to make them green light families. So families can learn and grow. And part of that is to find their core values. And part of that is to really find the voice of each and every individual of the family so that they all become aligned with each other. And we do this through assessments, family assessments and individual assessments on their personality and also on their financial DNA behavior. So that we have several tools, whether it's the Colby Index or financial DNA, where we assess individual family members. This is all to really get the theme of the family and to pull out the gems, if you will. And this is really the goal, is to have successful outcomes. Because what we find is that families, if we can pull out that value system or that vision, it helps align them over their faith, their purpose, and their true worth of the family. Now, I'm just going to touch briefly, very quickly on this, which is, close to 50% of families will have an addicted individual inside of it. And all the good work that you do in consulting on the business strategies and also the ownership structure of shareholder ownership can really be disintegrated if we run into an addicted individual that can sabotage the family, the work that you're doing with the family.
So just to know that if there is addiction in the family, there's going to be an enabler. There's going to be basically a co-addicted person that's helping to keep this person in that state. We've all heard the elephant in the room time and time again. It might be obesity, food addiction, it might be spending. There's a lot of different traditional addictions, and then it might be screen time. It might be now that there's gambling. So it's changing now that technology is changing as far as the easy access to purchasing things online and or fintech and being able to spend your money easily. So the 6 really personalities that you'll see in the system, you'll see an enabler, somebody who kind of, and everybody in the system might be an enabler. Now, it's not that all families are dysfunctional or functional. It's really to what scale on the spectrum they act. So you have the scapegoat, the hero, a lost child, a mascot or a clown or a caretaker. And so if you would like to know more about this, please reach out to us and we can, we've done seminars specifically on this. But again, we're bringing this up because Russ will talk about how podcasting can help increase communication and realign people. Again, we're looking for positive outcomes for family. And what we find is that as consultants or advisors or trusted advisors working with families, we want to help create a culture and environment of high performance. And we do this by, again, finding the family story, pulling out the gems, establishing a family vision, and making roles and responsibilities and establishing those boundaries. Because boundaries are very important when it comes to family businesses. Even though they are enmeshed, they need to have individuality. And that's really the balance that you have with families. There needs to be a clear communication and vision strategy. And that's really what podcasting can address. And also setting clear expectations and evaluation. Again, we do this by not only putting a carrot of encouragement and incentivizing family members, but there also is a voiced or a known transparent consequence to negative behavior. So just a couple things from industrial organizational psychology with Russ and I both enjoy. To build a cohesive and team behavior, you can start by doing task cohesion, which is really just helping individual members work together on a specific goal or a task. And so we find this overlapping with sports psychology. There's a task cohesion, which is the unit works as a goal, moving to one goal, almost a buy-in factor, if you will. And then there's a social cohesion, which is kind of like what they do with team building exercises, to go somewhere and to get personalities exposed. We do this by assessment, by knowing what your financial personality is, what your innate born personality is, what your learned behavior, and really most importantly, what is your personality under stress and under pressure. So we really think cohesion is like glue for the family. And so, teammates that pick up each other and carry each other off and on the field is really what it's about. It's about liking each other. And even if you don't like your siblings in your family business, we try to get to a point of respect and understanding of the differences that may lie. Okay. So with that, I'm going to switch over to Russ. Do you have it there? Okay.
Thank you. And thanks for joining today. And as Brian says, I'm going to be talking about podcasting as a potential medium for you and your family business. So why am I here? Firstly, my day job is as a family business consultant, but I'm also a podcast host, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail later on, but I actually became a full-time family business advisor as a result of hosting the podcast. As Brian alluded to in my introduction, my background was in financial planning and wealth management, working predominantly with family-owned businesses on creating financial independence strategies for senior generation as they're leaving perhaps their management roles within the business. But through the impact of the podcast, I've been able to move away from the financial planning and wealth management side and just focus entirely on being a family business advisor. As passionate as I am about family business, I'm also as passionate about podcasting. So it's a good topic for me to be talking about today. And the key is, I think, although podcasting has been around for quite a long time, it is still a relatively new concept, and it's a growing medium. And because it's becoming more popular, the tools and the stuff that you've got access to allow you to do podcasting yourself have become far more accessible and a lot easier to use. And so actually starting your own podcast or considering starting your own podcast is far easier than most people might think. So to put it into context, just to take you back to why I started the podcast that I host, I'm a very strong believer in providing answers to the types of questions that potential customers might want to know the answer to. So that concept is known as content marketing. And effectively, if you look at your own behavior when you're looking to buy a product or a service, most people would go to the internet and they would go, I don't know, BMW versus Mercedes, or what is a top 10 new TVs, but whatever the product is that you're looking to buy, you tend to go to Google and ask the question in the search bar of what you're looking for. And being found to have the answers to those questions is a good way to start educating your potential customers about the services that you offer, but in a way that's helping them get the answers they need rather than just a sales pitch to them. With this in mind, I started writing a book, and the book was looking at the financial, technical, and emotional issues that people were facing in planning their succession. And throughout that, I interviewed many different advisors, lawyers, accountants, financial planners, family business members, and utilized the interviews to create the book. Now, the book is still sat on my laptop, unpublished, but as a result of that process, I found the interviews far more interesting, far more insightful than reading my own words back to myself, and so decided that I would start a podcast as opposed to writing the book. In terms of distribution, you might print, I don't know, 150 copies of the book initially, give it away to people for them to prop doors open with or hold up wobbly tables with. But the podcast has actually got a far greater reach than the book may have. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on. So I looked at the behavior of people who were searching for solutions. And predominantly, there's a statistic from Google that states roughly 70% of a buying decision is made online before first contact with a particular business. And so people are doing research on the business itself. People are looking for answers to questions that they need answering. And they're looking in lots of different places. So Google's the obvious one, but they're also looking on social media. They're also searching YouTube, which I think is still the second most used search engine. And they're turning to mediums like podcasting to find out answers because it's available on their terms, rather than it being inviting somebody in to do a sales pitch and then fearing for the worst when that person won't leave, for example. They're able to digest and utilize the information on their own terms. And that's why I decided to launch a podcast. And my podcast has been going for about just over 3 years, so 3.5 years probably now. And these are pretty up-to-date stats. According to one group of statistics, there's 1.9 million podcasts. Radjar, who do the sort of formal statistics, their estimates around 1.75 million podcasts. And so you might be looking at it thinking, well, if there's 1.75 million, why would I start another one? There's enough out there for people. And that's backed up by the kind of 43 million episodes that are available for people to listen to. But the beauty of podcasting is that it's your voice, it's your values, it's your business ethos, it's everything about your personality that's coming across in those podcasts. And so in the same way as there's hundreds of different programs and films and documentaries and everything we can all watch on demand, podcasting is the same. So that's why I've put the comment in there about it being the Netflix for your ears, is that if you want to find a podcast subject on something, you can search podcast directories for it. And so if your customers or your suppliers or whoever it is are looking for a podcast on a particular subject, they can search for that. Because I was in financial planning, I had the choice of focusing my podcast on whether I talked about financial planning matters for family businesses or broadened it out to a much wider scope of the issues and challenges that family business face. And I decided on the latter purely because a good friend of mine had, or still has, a podcast called the Meaningful Money Podcast, which is regularly in the top 20 on the iTunes charts. And so I thought, why go up against him when at the time there were no other family business podcasts? I think another one launched either the week before or the same week as me, ironically with the same name. It wasn't a particularly imaginative name, to be fair, but there were two family business podcasts released around about the same time. But the opportunity it allows is to communicate with your ideal customer. But what I'm also going to talk about a little bit later on is how they can also be used as a communication tool as part of your wider family communication sort of strategy and governance. So I'm a big proponent of podcasting, but in order for me to get started, I needed to find out what it was and how to get started, and what are the main barriers to why weren't more people doing it, basically. And so, as I say, I chose my subject. My subject was family business issues and challenges. And I decided at that point that I would interview people, because I was still in a phase in my career where I was learning as much as I possibly could about the ways in which people can work with family businesses, some of the academic theory that runs alongside what was happening on the ground. And so I decided to interview as many people as I possibly could about the subjects that I felt needed answering for family businesses. And so I planned out the first 50 episodes, and that might seem a lot. And it might be that you think, well, actually, there's no way I could plan out 50 episodes because we sell a widget or we do one thing. But what starts to happen as you list down potential for ideas on episodes is that all of a sudden you find that there are easily 50, if not more. Just last week, I released episode 100, and I've got the rest of this year planned out in terms of episodes. And so there's an endless sort of supply of ideas around what episodes you could record podcasts on. But it's just starting that process of listing it out. And one of the things I found as a massive help for me when I did it was something called the Big Five. Now, the Big Five was a sort of content marketing concept that was created by Marcus Sheridan. And he took on a swimming pool business just as the financial crisis hit in 2008. And the business was facing a pretty bleak outlook. And so he sat down one night and thought, how do I get more people to buy from me? How do I get people to understand what it is I do? And how do I get people to come to me and filter out those that I don't want to necessarily work or buy my swimming pools, for example? And so he came up with the big five, which are cost and price articles. In his case, it was blogs. So how much does a fiberglass swimming pool cost is something somebody might put into Google. He created articles based on that. He then looked at problems. So what are the 5 major downsides of using a fiberglass pool? And again, created content based on that. Comparisons. Again, I'm only using his examples on swimming pools, but fiberglass versus concrete, for example, as a comparison. And then a review, top 5 swimming pool manufacturers in the US, or best of, top 10, top 5, top 20, all those kinds of ideas. And if you start looking at the products or services that you offer and then cross-referring them to the big 5, it starts to give you a matrix and an idea of how to create content on those topics that your audience are searching for. What Marcus found was these 5 issues were the top 5 searched for requests on Google. So creating content that his ideal customer would find and being top of the search results is what created the big 5 for him. So you can create a content matrix to help you get to the first 50 topics for your podcast, simply by putting the services you offer or challenges faced by your audience across the top on an Excel spreadsheet, and have a different column for each service or challenge that they might face. And then down the left-hand side, list out the big 5. So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, and best ofs, top 10, that kind of thing. In addition, a lot of the search results on Google are started with the phrases how to or what is. And so again, if there's stuff that you're doing as a business that is how to choose option A versus option B, or what is option A as a search topic, creating content that speaks to that is going to ensure that you get found when people search for that type of content. Currently on Google, I think it depends on geography, but I'm risking being wrong here. But if you Google what is a family charter, within the top 2 or 3 search results will be my podcast episodes on what is a family charter. Same with family assembly, same with family governance. Where I've spent time creating those types of episodes, it means that search traffic is being driven to my site. And for a fairly niche market, I'm getting over 1,000 visits to my site each month, driven by search traffic linked to the episodes that I create. So it's generating business for me that way as well. Once you've got your topics and your ideas and your episode plan, how you want to present it. So will it be a solo show? Will it be 2 of you discussing certain concepts? Will it be you interviewing other people? One of the tips I would suggest is to make it look professional. And again, there's some really cost-effective ways of doing this using things like Canva. Canva is a sort of plug and play design tool that allows you to create logos and graphics, but to bespoke dimensions, so you don't have to worry about whether it's going to fit on the podcast page or whether it's going to fit on any other social media side of things. But it allows you to create something that makes it look professional. I also decided to create a website for my podcast. So the website is fanbizpodcast.com, and that has developed and grown again over the last 3.5 years to something that is becoming a hub for information about topics relating to family business. So there's a combination of videos, podcasts, blogs, all sorts on there on various different topics. One of the biggest compliments I had with the podcast was I got sent a guest guide by somebody who also hosted a podcast, and they said you can use it, change it to suit your podcast, but it just outlines to your guests what to expect when they appear on the show. And the biggest compliment I got from that was somebody who had been interviewed quite extensively by US TV networks, radio networks, and other podcasters. And they said the process of being interviewed by me was the most professional they'd ever come across, because I simply sent them a guest guide saying, here's what to expect, and an episode plan of here's what I'm going to cover and here's the questions we're going to talk about. I took for granted that because I was relatively comfortable sitting in front of a microphone and across from a screen from somebody, that everybody was comfortable or relatively comfortable in doing that. But if you're inviting guests to appear on your show, it can be quite intimidating, quite daunting to have people sort of asking you questions, and you don't want to slip up and say something you shouldn't or anything like that. So having this guest guide and the episode plan helps to ease your guests into what they're going to be talking about on the show as well. So I'd recommend looking at those. Now you might need some equipment. That microphone is my actual microphone. That's the one I'm talking to you on now. It's above my screen via a boom arm, a shock mount, and a pop filter. That's what these are. And you can probably buy all of that for around $250. And it helps when you're recording for the quality to be relatively good. So if you are looking to invest into creating a podcast, I would spend a little bit of money on the equipment. But if you just want to try it out, you've actually got everything you need on your phone to record, edit, and launch a podcast. Now, there's certain tools that you can subscribe to. There's an app called Anchor, which you may have come across. There's quite a popular app at the moment called Clubhouse as well, which is effectively hosting rooms to talk about stuff. It's not recorded, I don't think, but it's a way for you to use your phone as a discussion tool with your potential clients and customers. But if you are looking to dip your toe into podcasting, you don't want to invest in the equipment, you can just launch a show pretty easily through Anchor, and they kind of do all the hard work for you on their end. So as I say, it is relatively easy to get into. Microphone companies are catching on to the fact that podcasts are becoming more and more popular, and so they're offering entry-level microphones at a really high standard. Because podcasting is growing so much. Actually, I do podcast coaching as well. So if businesses are looking to launch podcasts, I can help them with their strategy around that. And I had two main microphones that I linked to when I'm giving that advice. And during the lockdown period here in the UK, they actually sold out. I think so many people were keen to launch a podcast, and they actually ended up selling out of those microphones. If you are looking to record a podcast onto a laptop, for example, there's some free software. So something called Audacity, which is free, it's open source, so it gets updated all the time. It has quite a lot of functionality to allow you to adjust levels and add effects onto voice recordings. There's various different tutorials in forums and on YouTube to help set up what you want for the voice recording. Or you can use QuickTime or GarageBand and just record directly into that. Use the tools that are available via your laptop or MacBook. I use a tool called Descript, which I can record directly into. It creates a transcript for me, and I can edit within that software. And to edit a word out, I literally select it, press delete, and it deletes it from the audio recording, but does it really smoothly. So it's quite a good bit of kit. If again, you have to pay a subscription for it, but it's pretty useful from that perspective. Or as I say, you can utilize your phone. There's recording voice notes on your phone you can record on there. So quite often if I am at a conference and there's somebody there I want to speak to, I ask them to talk into my phone with me, and that becomes a podcast. There are some technicalities to it. So you do need a host. The reason you need a host is they look after all of the episodes and distribution for you. Now, as you can imagine, there's more and more of these growing. I use Captivate. I used to use Libsyn, but Captivate are relatively new to the market. They are built by podcasters, and the access to stats and analytics is fantastic. As I say, you've got Anchor, you've got Podbean, you've got various other hosts that can be used. They're all pretty easy to set up. You've just got to choose one you're comfortable with, and they're probably around $20 a month each to be able to utilize those. And then the number of destinations is growing and continues to grow. So Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, obviously, Spotify are, I think, going to be quite influential in the podcasting market. You may have seen the Joe Rogan show is exclusively on Spotify. I think Oprah's got a show exclusively on Spotify. A lot of the, direction of travel with podcasting is to reward podcasters with some financial returns in a similar way to sort of royalties, I guess. And Spotify, I think, are going to be making an announcement about that in the next few weeks. So that's interesting to see what happens in that space. I'm often asked if there's any rules with podcasting. The short answer is no. The main rule is if you're going to swear, you need to tell your audience you're going to swear so that iTunes can mark it as explicit. If you are found to be talking about stuff on a podcast that should be marked explicit and isn't, you can get taken down. So you need to be careful of that. But if you're going to swear, just mark it as explicit when you load it up, and that takes care of that. There's no real ideal length. A lot of people try to tailor their podcast to the length of their sort of average commuter journey. Here in the UK, nobody's commuting anywhere at the moment because we're all on lockdown. I think commuting is going to change as we emerge from that. So tailoring it to that might not work. Some people keep it to an hour because if you're working out in a gym, generally it would be an hour. But again, no hard and fast rules. It's whatever works for you. My shortest podcast is 20 minutes. My longest is an hour and 45. And so there's no rules. There's no distinction between downloads on those as well. The only thing I would be careful of is music licensing. You can't play music in a podcast without the license. There are ways and means of getting licensed music into your podcast, but you have to buy that license. So my theme tune, if you like, is bought from a site that allows you to license that for worldwide use. But I would just be careful of that. But other than that, there's no real rules around it. It's whatever you or your customers would want to hear. So if you've gone through the process of deciding what format you want, listing out your top 50 episodes, you've got all the equipment, you've got your theme tune, you've got everything else recorded, and you're going for it. The next stage is to ensure you have a launch strategy. And the importance here is you want to try and gain traction early on and then make life easier for you than, say, just recording one episode and launching it. The reason being is there's so much excitement when you've done a lot of work on launching your own podcast. If you've got one episode and you hit go and then it kind of, you wait for all the download figures to hit, it can be a bit of an anticlimax. It can be a bit kind of, oh, I've got to record another one now to keep up with next week and the week after and the week after. So planning it out and having a launch strategy where ideally you launch with more than one episode. So 3 is a good number. Tell everybody you know to subscribe, to download, and to leave a 5-star review. Because iTunes, for example, is an algorithm. And if it sees that there's a particular show that's really popular, it's getting a lot of reviews, it's getting a lot of listens to, it's going to start promoting that to more and more people as part of that algorithm. So having a launch strategy gives you the best opportunity for success. And what you're really looking for is to be featured in the new and noteworthy section, which is updated on a regular basis and highlights to new listeners that might be just scrolling through looking for something interesting, the ones that are proving popular with other people. One of the other things I would encourage with podcasting as well is to understand what you're going to measure in terms of success. So if you're doing it to get 1 million downloads, it might be quite despondent, might be quite depressing to get to sort of 10,000 and think, well, I've got nowhere near my success metric. If you want to create engagement with your potential customers, then having that as a good success metric is useful, because it's far easier to measure than it is just to go purely for downloads. Just because someone downloads it doesn't mean they listen to it. So there's that to consider as well. So perhaps measuring engagement is better for success measures. In order to get to that stage, I would recommend being consistent and being persistent. It can be pretty lonely. You can have days where you've spent hours recording a podcast and editing it and making it beautiful and sound great, and you release it and 7 people listen to it, and you think, oh, I've done all that for 7 people to listen to. But it grows over time, and it becomes, I've now got 100 episodes, roughly an hour long. So that's 100 hours of a book of work for me that I'm really proud of. And that wouldn't have happened if I'd given up after, say, 10 or 12 episodes, which is where the vast majority of people do give up. And embrace the messy. You are going to say stuff that you listen back to and go, oh, did I really say that? Or your guest is going to answer in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, or something what will happen where you think, oh, should I hit publish on that? My tip here is to embrace the messy and go with it. So that's what I did. That's how I launched my podcast. That's how I went about the structure, the format, promoting it, all that kind of stuff. And some snapshot figures on the impact it's had on me and my life. So it's 100 plus episodes, as I've said. I've managed to interview some of the leading experts in the field of family business, and I've interviewed a Sir here in the UK, Sir John Timpson, who runs one of the UK's best known and best loved businesses. It's led to a change in my career. I've been able to move away from family business work within a financial planning context to full-time family business consultancy. A couple of weeks ago, I passed 100,000 downloads on the show, which again, for a relatively niche show, is something I'm proud of. And it's led to other projects and speaking opportunities. I'm speaking to you now. I've spoken at conferences across the world on family business issues, but also on podcasting. So it's really opened the door to something that it wasn't part of the expectation when I started it. And so some of the benefits that it could bring to your family business, excuse me just a sec, is exposure and brand awareness. If you're recording something that is your personality, that is bespoke to you, that is recorded in a way that highlights the sort of values, the family values that are inherent within your business, you're reaching your potential customers and talking directly to them through that. And so it creates a level of trust. I have people who contact me completely out of the blue, where they have listened to many different shows and they now talk to me as if they know me when we've never met, we've never spoken. They might drop me an email saying, sharing an awful lot about what's going on within their own family, because that level of trust has been built up because they've been listening to me for a number of years, talking about the stuff that's going on with them. It's also an opportunity for you to dictate what your audience hears. So if you offer a particular service in a particular way, you can highlight that through your podcast, possibly in an easier way than you can through blogs or advertising, that kind of thing. And because it's such a growing medium, you're engaging with a new audience. Now, the stats are shifting on this each time are published, but generally the 25 to 35-year-olds are the ones that are listening to podcasts. Now, that is changing. There's a lot more spread over the demographics now than there was before. But you're talking potentially to a new audience who are looking for answers to their questions in a different place to where traditional marketing might provide that. There are sponsorship opportunities. And there's the opportunity to build relationships with influencers in your marketplace. And again, that's a real kind of hidden benefit that's happened to me throughout this, is because I've been able to interview some of the greatest minds in the field of family business. I'm now in a fortunate position where I can arrange meetings with them to discuss a particular challenge that I might be facing that I haven't come up against before, or attend events that I wouldn't normally get access to if I hadn't started the podcast. So there's other sort of side benefits to it as well. And it also provides some credibility. If you're talking about the subject that you're doing as your job, as the family business's sort of occupation, if you like, it's a way of creating credibility. If someone rings me and says, or sends me an email saying, have you got any information on what a family charter is? Again, I can send them videos, blogs, and podcast episodes, all of me talking about all of this stuff. So it helps to provide them with answers to their questions and build credibility for me at the same time. So there's lots of different benefits to the business itself. One of the constraints, I guess, the negative side is the amount of time it takes. So I self-edit and produce all my own shows. So every time I record an episode that's an hour long, it's probably another hour and a half to edit it. It's then probably another hour to create the web page and show notes and blog and everything else that goes along with that. I do that because I enjoy doing that, but I could outsource that. I could use a producer. I could use a transcription service. I could use a copywriter if I wanted to. I do sometimes batch record, which helps get over some of the barriers around timings. Is just block a day out and record 2 or 3 different episodes, and then that's it for a week. 2 or 3 weeks, because they're already recorded. But there's always solutions to the problems that come up. And so if time's one of them, there's lots of things you can outsource to remove that particular barrier. There are costs, but it's relatively cost effective. Hosting's about $20. The producer that I have used in the past is about $35 per show, and you send it to him via Dropbox. Within a day, it's back, edited, ready to be released. The equipment, you can get by with very little equipment, or you can go crazy and spend thousands of dollars on it. The main cost, I think, is time, but again, it's time that's well spent, because for me, it's a passion. It's something I love doing. So I don't find that too much of an issue. There are some common barriers or excuses. I don't have time. I thought, have I really got time to do this? And for me, it was about priority. So everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. It then becomes about priority. So if it becomes a priority, you'll find the time. If not, then maybe it's not for you, or not. It could be somebody else's role that could do the podcasting for you. I don't like the sound of my own voice. The easy answer to that is don't listen back to your episodes. Just record them and release them. I very rarely listen back to my episodes because I don't like the sound of my own voice. So I just record it, edit it, release it, and then that's it. I don't have enough to say. If you plan properly, if you structure it in a way that allows you to cover different topics, and then allow your personality to come out, I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you can fill up 20 minutes or half an hour on a podcast. Even if it's 15 minutes long, if it's a regular thing where your audience are hearing you, 15 minutes is plenty. No one will listen. I thought that. There were days where literally no one listened, no one downloaded, and that became a bit depressing. But it's now at a stage where it's past 100,000 downloads, regularly get contacted by people who are looking to work with me as a result of what's come off the podcast. So again, I don't think there's too much of a barrier or excuse. There's lots of different resources out there to support you. So there's a chap called Colin Gray, who's the podcast host. Captivate, who I talked about, have a launch accelerator program, which is free, which you can utilize. As I say, I've been approached by many businesses asking me to help them with their podcast launch strategy. And I do that as well. So if you are looking for some more help or support, I'm happy to talk about that as well. And just some final thoughts. It's a great way to communicate with your potential customers. And as with anything in terms of marketing, if you're not doing it, one of your competitors may well be. And I think that's happening more and more, particularly in the podcasting world. As I said, when I launched, there was one other family business podcast. There's now lots of other family business podcasts. There's loads of people that are doing it. And for me, I think that's a great thing. I think all ships rise in a rising tide. So the more people that are talking about this stuff, the better it is. And because it's a personal thing, some people prefer mine to others, and they'll prefer others to mine. On top of that, it's also an innovative way to communicate with your family. So if your family is spread out over different cities, different countries even, having a podcast as a way to communicate with them on an annual basis. A podcast is basically an audio recording. But if you're able to do that on a regular basis and communicate that via, it's another way for people to listen, keep in touch with what's going on within the family business without the need for in-person meetings every week. So if there's an update from the head of the business on a monthly basis, and then annual get-togethers as a family to talk about that kind of stuff, it's a useful way to communicate. It's also an incredible way to capture your family history and your family story. One of the projects I've been involved in is a guest on my show approached me, having been interviewed me, saying, I really want you to interview my family history out of me. My interview technique appealed to him. And so we've undertook 30 hours of recording that has captured his incredible family business history and his story. And that's something that can be passed on for generations. And we have the means now to record stuff that we've not had before necessarily. Particularly at our fingertips, we can just record these things pretty easily. So that's another way to look at it. If it's not something you want to do publicly, then it can be done privately. And then I think I'll open the floor to questions if I stop sharing that. I don't know whether I saw the chat was going, but I didn't have it open. So
that's okay. I was able to read a couple of questions that came in. But before we hit that, I just want to comment. Thank you so much for reviewing that. I thought that was extremely informative and very detailed. Thank you for sharing some of the insider secrets, if you will, of how to start it. One quick question. If you're somebody who's a novice or really doesn't know about podcasting and you want to, you may not even ever downloaded a podcast. I love when you said this is Netflix for the ears. I think that's fantastic. But what shopping, stores or what virtual platforms are the best ones to initiate yourself to it? Is it Apple, iTunes, or what are the top three, if you will?
So there's Apple Podcasts, which they've now separated out as a specific app, the podcast app. So if you've got an Apple device, you will have a podcast app. And that is a search engine. You go in there and search. Spotify is probably the next best known one. And then Amazon Music or Google Podcast as well. Okay. But there's so many. There's probably 50 plus podcast players that can be utilized. They're probably the biggest three.
And Audible, where would Audible fall in there?
Audible says it lists podcasts. I've had a little bit of a challenge with it because it's listed on Amazon Music, and Amazon is linked to Audible, but it's not listed within Audible. And I think it's because I'm based in the UK. I think it's predominantly US based stuff that's on Audible.
Okay.
But the get around on that is Amazon Music lists the UK stuff.
Yeah, I think Audible is owned by Amazon.
Yeah, right.
Great. Okay. One question came through. It seems that you've received a good deal in finding a producer for $30, or what's the best way to engage or find a producer?
Again, there's lots of different ones out there. The guy that I use is very good. He was recommended to me by another podcaster, and I'm happy to share details of his. If I share them with you, and then you can distribute them via that. But also people per hour, Fiverr, those kind of services will always have audio producers that are there.
Mhm.
I would urge some caution on this because it's so popular. Lots of people who are able to just tinker around on their laptop are now selling their services as podcast producers.
Mhm.
So I would look for somebody who's been established for a while and is able to back up what they say with a list of podcasters that they work with. So the one that I use is a guy called James Ede, EDE, and he is very good. He's been going for a long time. It is his job. It's his full-time job. He's an exceptional resource. I don't want to give his details out too many times because he'll become too busy to work.
No,
with.
I understand. Now, one question: would you say that the podcast is a revenue maker for you, or does it, really act as kind of a brand builder, as you had mentioned, that drives your business towards your goal?
So I have got work out of the podcast. People have listened to the shows. They have then followed up and said, can we work with you? And obviously I'm more than happy to do that. I haven't kept any real analysis of the direct cost or return on investment, but I did speak at an event where somebody asked that direct question. They said, what's your return on investment? And at that stage, I was relatively early in the process, and it cost about £3,000, I think, up to that point. So $4,500, maybe something like that, over that couple of years. And somebody in the audience stood up and said, I basically retorted with the response of, I'm not doing it in order to make money. It's more important for me to get the information out there. It's something I love doing. It's something I enjoy doing. And somebody in the audience stood up and said, that's exactly why we want to work with you, is because you're not using it as a tool directly to make money off of people.
Yeah.
It's much more, for me, it's about giving back and providing useful information, albeit that people are now starting to engage my services as a result, because again, it's been going 3.5 years. Typically speaking, I don't know whether you see this as well, Brian, but when it comes to family business, it's such a personal thing. It takes a lot of trust to go and work with a family business, and that takes
Absolutely.
a long time to build up. And so having that as a resource for people to show that I'm not just around for the next 5 minutes and I do actually know what I'm talking about, it's been very helpful from that perspective.
That's great. And I think you're exactly right. This concept, I mean, I'm 48 years of age, and Generation X, and I think that I also come from a background where I got paid for our intellectual property and our research. So this, for me, has been a very kind of an eye-opening experience, and also changing my innate behavior of being protective of intellectual property. Right. So this really, inverting yourself inside out and letting the world see you and expose yourself to a certain extent. Even though I'm extroverted, anybody would tell you, I find that a conflict, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So it's really great to talk to you and to get your feelings and experience over 3 years. And congratulations on over 100,000 downloads. Just it's amazing. I think of the classic thing of, I'm a 20 year overnight success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And when in doubt, chop wood. And chopping wood, that's been my theme for 2020. When in doubt, just put your head down and grind it out. And with these podcasts, I think that's the same way. I love how you have the guide, which helps you kind of think about your speaker events, gives you kind of a concept of how to visualize what's going to come, and maybe break up the different themes, if you will. I think that's incredible advice that you've shared with our audience. And I also think that, it's just a great way to, like you said, to build rapport. In this crazy world where we're all on Zoom, it's hard to kind of get that intimate connection. Yeah. And I think the more people, this is a great thing I want to share with our audience. I had the privilege at St. Joe's to teach to the young leaders of tomorrow, everything from freshman to senior to graduate school. And I ask them quite often, how do you build trust? And Russ, you'd be amazed, they can't come up with answers. It's interesting, they know how to break trust, right? but they don't know, it kind of stumps them. They have to think about it. And this idea of doing what you say and saying what you do over time, being consistent in your word and your behavior over time, people then can rely on you that you're trustworthy.
Right.
So that's what a podcast, I think, does over time. It's a consistent, persistent, layering of giving exposure to who you are, and your personality has to come out.
Absolutely. And just a very quick point on what you were saying about IP and the sort of giving away of that on a podcast. That is something else that's quite a common barrier. But to my mind, information has been democratized by the internet. So you can Google the answer to anything.
Yeah.
I could Google how to perform brain surgery. Nobody would want me to go anywhere near doing brain surgery. Right. So the application is still what takes that intellectual property, that knowledge, that how to do.
Being a practitioner. Yeah,
absolutely. But making it people aware that actually you're not the only person suffering from this challenge or this problem.
Very true.
And if people are searching for stuff on the internet, being the person that is found helps you to educate that there is solutions out there, that this product or this service exists in order to solve that problem. And so it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to take everything they know and run off. Obviously, there is some danger of that. And there are people that have got in touch and said, thanks very much for all your episodes. We've gone through and employed a lot of the stuff you've done. Yeah. But I'm happy with that, because if it's made things better for them, then even better.
You're a better man than me.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be not. A couple of my guests have got very significant contracts off the back of appearing. And,
oh boy.
The thank you email from them's great, but it does stick a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I love what you said there, because it's so true. Now, my background in psychology and your experience with this, obviously, is paramount about this idea that, and I also, talk about some of our family businesses. I do sales training and basic sales training. So it's this idea of what you just said about commonality or the common problem. Right? If you can identify a common problem, then you just gave me a great insight into that's one of the quickest ways, if you share a common problem, for people to have common ground.
Yep.
And common ground is the first step in sales to build rapport and trust. So that's just excellent. That's again, it's so obvious to a certain extent, but it's all about the minutia, right? Building the mosaic. The one piece at a time. And so that I really think that's awesome. And we have somebody saying sharing intellectual property via podcast will only boost your own value as a subject matter expert. Yeah, thank you for that, Albert. That's excellent. I would agree with that. So I had to tell you, the chat has been kind of on fire. I really have not seen a chat like this in a very long time, Russ. And I'm not just blowing sunshine here. But I had to tell you, people are very appreciative. They're really interested in the information you shared. I would highly recommend they reach out to you if you have capacity for coaching them in any capacity. They may not want to reach out to me because I'm not an expert in this area, so I would defer to you. But I think that's awesome. Somebody said the chat's on fire because it's truly interesting and great presentation. Well, there you go, Russ. That's
very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and of course, your British accent always helps.
Yeah.
We're suckers for that. We're suckers. Okay, so just a quick little commercial, if I may. Unless you want to, we're going to wrap up here in lieu of time. Do you want any final words that you want to share with the audience, Russ?
No, just the only thing is, if you're thinking about it, it sounds a very simple thing to say, but just do it, just try it. It's a very easy thing to say, well, I've done 5 episodes, it wasn't for me, and I can move on. But the amount of businesses that I've worked with now on helping them launch something, the excitement it creates amongst their teams, amongst the family, amongst those in their business, it's something that can really help to kind of reignite passion. And it sounds a bit contradictory to say talking about yourself can have that impact, but I would highly recommend it. I would say I'm biased. I'm very passionate about it, but just do it. It's such a fun journey.
That's excellent. And I just want to thank you. And I want to share on the video here next week, next Wednesday, just a little commercial, please forgive me. But I just want to make you aware, we will be having a guest of the Starboard Advisors with the Keller Financial Family Office, and we'll be talking about financial education for the next generation. And basically everything from financial literacy to very young children. So I think that's going to be awesome. And of course, Russ, you're invited. So let me just do this here. All right, and okay. So this is Russ's information. You can email him at familybusinesspartnership.com. If you have any questions about this presentation, feel free to reach out to us. Again, here at St. Joe's University, we are out-facing to the public for family businesses. If you work with a family business and like to have a co-consulting relationship with us to that family, we're more than happy to do that. If you are a family business and you'd like to engage us to go through our process and to learn about our webinars that we put on and some of our low-level consulting which we do to optimize your family, your business, and shareholder value, we'd be happy to talk to you. Membership is actually, we are extending free membership to the end of our fiscal year, which is June. So there's no reason why you can't reach out to us and become a member just for the next couple of months to get kind of a free look, if you will, on what we're doing. All right. So with that, I think we have, I think that'll be it. Thank you so much, Russ, for your information. We truly appreciate it. Jen Merritt, thank you for setting up the webinar. Thank you so much for co-hosting us, Jen. Again, please reach out to Jen or myself, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.